A very big week for President Trump as the Republican National Convention kicks off. The president looking to make his case for re-election and counter Joe Biden and the Democrats' message. Earlier, the president making a surprise visit to the stage in Charlotte, North Carolina, after being officially nominated. Take a look.
I felt an obligation to be here. You have a governor who's in a total shutdown mood. I guarantee on November 4th, it'll all open up. We have to win. Our country is counting on it. This is the biggest. This is it. Our country can go in a horrible, horrible direction or in an even greater direction. This base doesn't like Joe Biden. They don't like Joe Biden. That's right. I think we're going to get a lot of votes. They're going to raise your taxes, quadruple your taxes. They're going to add on to the regulations so that all of these projects that we got started that are great projects, they won't be able to get built.
The president is set to lay out his second-term agenda this week, focusing on jobs, fighting the pandemic, and defending law enforcement. President Trump also set to appear at all 4 nights of the convention. So, Jesse Waters, is this week, the beginning of this week, like your birthday and Christmas all rolled into one?
Well, compared to the DNC drum circle of death, yeah, this is going to be an RNC that's focused on optimism, opportunity, and American greatness. As you said, he unlaid his second-term agenda: jobs, energy, vaccine, China, law and order, space. It's pretty powerful stuff. Joe's not going to know what hit him after this week. This election's not about character. It's about competence. And Joe Biden's been an incompetent mess his entire career. He's never delivered for the American worker. And the president's actually winning. In CBS poll, he's up 10 points with independents against Joe Biden. And that's a D12 sample, which totally drives me crazy. Joe Biden does not have what it takes. The president has activated the RNC this week. They're going to be holding 7,000 meetups all across the country this week. Last week, they knocked on 1 million doors. Again, this week, they're knocking on another million. Joe Biden's team has knocked on 0 doors. It's all just virtual. So this is a real turnout operation that the Democrats can't compete with. I think there's a silent majority out there. They've been kind of laying low with cancel culture, and the Democrats are going to get a rude awakening. They're walking into the president's trap. The Democratic base has lost control. They rioted all weekend in Portland, all over Denver. They arrested these guys with bats and liquids that I won't name. It's disgusting stuff, and a lot of the police unions that endorsed Joe Biden and Barack Obama last time have now switched over to endorse the president. And this comes at the same time as Joe continues to stay in his basement and lets the media do the work for him. President Trump now actually holding events with live audiences. It's starting to get good.
All right. And Greg, you're Greg. Jesse mentions, of course, the violence that we've seen in a few of the cities continued over the weekend. The president's definitely going to bring it up this week. It did not come up last week.
Right. I think Biden left 2 giant windows open for Trump to swoop right in like the flying orange velociraptor he is. The one of them is violence, and the other one is freedom. OK, so you have the first one is a contrast between law and order and radical destruction. When Joe chose to ignore the explosive crime wave, well documented, the riots, arson, vandalism, and death. And then they have like a rapist murderer at their convention. I think her name is Donna Hylton, who served like 27 years for this horrible kidnapping that lasted 15 days in which they tortured a gay man and in ways you don't even want to know. So it's this contrast is amazing. I know Juan's looking like I'm making this up, but you can Google it at the break. So Americans of all genders, of all races, want to live safely. They don't want their businesses burned down. And every Democratic leader that's abdicated that responsibility is basically telling you that they're not going to do it if they win. So I think the defense of civil society is number one. Finally, the other big message, freedom versus the shutdown. As we know, the goal of the shutdown was to flatten the curve, which we did heroically, but it wasn't meant to eliminate the virus because that's impossible. The path to destroying any country, really, is to create a goal that isn't reachable. So instead, we've got to research therapeutics and vaccines, but we have to get back to work. We got to get back to school. We got to reopen businesses. And one word that describes that perfectly is freedom. And the thing is, Joe's mouth is sealing Trump's reelection. Every time he defines himself as an autocrat with the mask mandate and then saying he's going to shut down the country, he's basically choosing authoritarianism. And that's driving the Democratic Party crazy because that's what they kept saying Trump was. The end.
And actually, so Juan, why don't you talk about that? I mean, there has been accusations about President Trump wanting to be an autocrat. But to Greg's point, what do you make of that?
What I make of that, that President Trump wants to be an autocrat, and you're saying because Vice President Biden said in his interview on ABC last night that if the scientists tell him that it's really important, imperative to shut down the country in order to stop the spread of the virus, he's willing to do it. I think that's pretty good for Joe Biden because Democrats have been making the case that they'll listen to the experts, that they won't put the American people at risk. And I think the second tier to that, Dana, is that the economy and our job prospects can't get back together until we have the virus under control. And we continue to see, as unemployment ticks up, that this is a continuing problem. But I just wanted to speak. I mean, obviously, today is the kickoff for the Republican convention. And President Trump today has already spoken. He spoke down in Charlotte, where you have some, I think it's 336 delegates from the Republicans all across the country meeting. As you know, because of the virus, they can't have the convention there. So everything will move to Washington tomorrow. But in his speech today, what does the president do? Basically, what he does is makes the Democrats' case for them. Why? Because he starts out not talking about positivity, optimism. Here's what I'm going to do. There's no platform, by the way, no platform. So instead, what he says is, oh, the Democrats are going to steal the election just like last time when they spied on me. Or the Democrats are going to use COVID to steal the election. And this election won't be valid unless I win. Otherwise, it was rigged. So this is, again, and you hear about violence and anarchy if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are elected. What happened to the positive, we're going to have a pro-America, go America, love America message for the people? This is just a rerun of grievance and fear-mongering.
But he did speak for an hour.
Sounds like the DNC.
And he hit a lot of those things. He did speak for an hour, and he did talk about a new list of things that they want to do in a second term that was quite comprehensive, especially on the economy. Kennedy, let me get you in here. What are you looking for in this next 4 days?
I'm looking for positivity. I'm actually looking for an agenda that shows Americans how they're going to capitalize on the freedom that Greg so critically talked about by making money and bettering their lives, empowering their families, and making decisions for themselves, because government is all over the place in terms of combating, the virus and everything else. And there was one delegate from North Carolina who actually had the best phrase that Republicans could use if they're going to capitalize on their moment, and that was jobs, not mobs. And it's a very clear way of contrasting what's happening in this country. You have people who haven't been able to work because the government has said that there has to be a lockdown. They want jobs. They want prosperity. They want personal fulfillment. And then in so many cities in the country, you do have these violent mobs. People don't want that. It makes them feel unsafe. And now so many people are working from home. They're thinking about mobility in ways they never have before, and thinking about moving to parts of the country that they had never thought of before, and they're not going to move to cities that are on fire.
All right, we've got a lot to talk about. A whole hour worth coming up for you. Joe Biden says he's open to another coronavirus lockdown if he wins in November. So how is President Trump responding to that? That's next on The Five.
Former Vice President Biden's been critical of President Trump's COVID response. The former VP now saying he would shut the country down again if scientists recommended it. Take a look.
I would shut it down. I would listen to the scientists. I don't blame him for the COVID crisis. I blame him for walking away and not dealing with the solutions. And the idea of saying that this is going to go away, this miracle is going to happen. I've been pleading with the president for the last 3 months. You need a plan.
And President Trump, he's hitting back. calling out Biden over the comments.
Biden the other day said, no, he'd shut it down. He'd listen to some guy say, and he'd shut it down. We just broke a record on jobs, an all-time record. Most of the country is right now doing very, very well. They've done an incredible job. And to have a man sitting on television the other day say, oh, I'd shut it down. Oh, I'd shut it, like it's easy, shut it down.
Greg, do you think it's a bad idea for the former vice president to say he'd listen to scientists?
Well, he should have listened sooner. But I love the pro-Biden media because out of one side of their mouth, they're fretting about the unemployment numbers. But then the other side of their mouth, they're screaming for more shutdown, which led to the high unemployment numbers. That's the beauty of being an LIP, a low information pundit, or LIP. You can say whatever you want because you don't remember it. Joe also said that you would have saved 40,000 lives if the shutdown was 2 weeks sooner. But why just 2 weeks, Joe? Why not 4 weeks? Why are you drawing the line there? What if we had done the shutdown at the beginning of January or at Christmas? The fact is we couldn't. Why was that? Because Joe Biden and his brood were saturating the American brain with something called impeachment, which elbowed out all COVID attention to the disgust of me because I was talking about COVID. So that is why impeachment wasn't mentioned at their convention, not only because it failed, but also because it killed thousands of people through distraction. And Trump's got to bring this up. Trump should say, imagine people, January and February without impeachment. We could have had a faster handle on COVID if they hadn't been chasing the fantasy of impeachment. Because he's right. And that's a terrible impression.
I'll give it to you. I got the idea. Kennedy, what strikes me here is that we saw what happened when President Trump didn't listen to the scientists, said this thing will magically disappear. You can go back to church on Easter. I think the U.S. has 4% of the world's population, 25% of its deaths. That's a terrible record for not listening.
Yeah, no, it's awful. And the disease has really ravaged communities and families, and there's no doubt about that. But a lot of that is because of the bureaucratic institutions that were inherited by this administration. I don't think that the president has a perfect record in dealing with COVID. But my problem with Joe Biden is he's not forward-looking at all. And he's not really talking about solutions that will make people's lives better. And I don't get a sense of urgency. And Greg's absolutely right. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have an economy that is shut down and then complain about the fruits of the shutdown, the rotting fruits of the shutdown. That's incredibly disingenuous. But I don't get a lot of vision from that. And Joe Biden's also talking about raising taxes. Let me remind you, Mr. Former Vice President, taxation is theft, and it's not a solution.
So, Dana, as I was saying in the earlier segment, as you know, the Democrats want to make this a referendum election. And part of that is to say the Democrats believe in science on so many issues, but specifically on COVID, and that they're willing to follow the science to protect us Americans. So what do you think?
Well, I talked to somebody today who was pretty high up there in the Democratic circles. And I asked him, I said, does this message work for you? Like, listen to scientists, we'll do what the scientists say. And he said, yes, that for the Democrats, they're polling independents. And he said even some Republicans like that message. However, I feel like that is it's too black and white. It ignores some of the things that we've already learned. We know a lot more than we did in January and February about how the virus is spread. We know that the three things really work: masks, social distancing, and hand washing. We also have some therapeutics now that are very helpful. So you see states that are actually making some progress, especially in like Arizona and Florida, also very important for all of those people that live there. But if you are Joe Biden or Donald Trump, you're paying very close attention to those battleground states. I feel that if the issue was put to the voters, should we do another strict lockdown, given all these other things that we know about how to protect ourselves and each other, then I think it would probably be 80% against another full lockdown like that, unless it was absolutely warranted. So I don't see that happening with the coronavirus. And now, in 2008, Joe Biden said of Rudy Giuliani that he was just noun, verb, 9/11. And you could almost say the same thing now about Joe Biden, right? Noun, verb, COVID. Maybe it will work for him, but I think that as these states see some progress, and hopefully people are doing all the right things with those things I mentioned, like the hand washing, and social distancing and masks, that maybe we can get everybody back to school and work and be healthy too.
Oh, that's a prayer. Jesse, I was thinking to myself that because the president downplayed the impact of COVID initially, that his announcement yesterday just came off as a dud. I mean, you know, people don't know if it's true or not true. You know, what's the importance of this therapy? But it seems like he has sacrificed his credibility on COVID.
Maybe it was a dud to you, Juan, but if you had the virus and your doctor said these are some antibodies and plasma that we're going to give to you to save your life, I guarantee you, Juan, you'd take it. So, Juan, I think that Joe Biden is really just being a simpleton. He's not being scientific. There is no way, if we could go back and redo the April shutdown situation, we do it in the same way. We would not do a blanket 50-state economic lockdown for 6 weeks. This is a virus that kills people who are over 65, 80% of the deaths over 65. You would do targeted lockdowns and quarantines to the sick and elderly. You would do travel bans, which Biden was against, and you do hygiene and masks and social distancing. We know so much more now about the mortality rate that maybe stuffing intergenerational families into small New York City apartments without masks maybe wasn't a good idea. And we know the costs psychologically, medically, and economically of blanket lockdowns. There'd be no way we're ever going back to that. Science is not mathematics. It develops as you get new information, you change and you pivot. Biden has not pivoted. And for you to act like Fauci and Birx in January said lock down the economy and Trump waited until mid-March, that's not true.
Yes,
24 hours after they advised him to lock down the economy, he pulled the trigger. That was when Joe Biden was out there campaigning and name-calling. So I think we need to get that straight. 5 straight weeks.
Name-calling.
Of down, remember, xenophobic. 5 straight weeks of us going down in cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. And now we have a very good perspective with this plasma. That's good news for the American people. It's not a dud.
All right, thanks, Jesse.
You're welcome.
Did Republicans looking to claim Joe Biden is far left just get a boost from former President Obama? We're going to explain that to you next on The Five.
Life is this way. Keep moving on. Keep moving on.
Speakers at the RNC this week set to attack Joe Biden as a tool of the far left, but maybe they should just let former President Obama do all the heavy lifting. He just said this in an interview, quote, "If you look at Joe Biden's goals and Bernie Sanders' goals, they're not that different from a 40,000-foot level." And here's Joe Biden calling for higher taxes on some Americans. Watch.
I will raise taxes for anybody making over $400,000. Let me tell you why I'm going to do it. It's about time they start paying a fair share of the economic responsibility we have. The very wealthy should pay a fair share. Corporations should pay a fair share.
Corporations. It's so interesting. So, Dana, is this a better way of sort of boxing in Joe Biden? Instead of just having a polemic and negative assault on his mental faculties, is it better for Republicans to say that he really is just Bernie Sanders light and a tool of some of the far-left progressives in the party?
I will guarantee you that President Obama just served up a ball that the Republicans will spike over and over again, because he just basically made their case for them. They've been trying to say that the Biden-Harris ticket will be just ushering in the far left's policies. And remember, Dr. Jill Biden told me, no, Joe's a moderate. You heard that a lot last week. He's moderate. He's like, but no. Barack Obama comes in and says, actually, Bernie and Biden are the same. It's not, they're all good. And I thought last night that it would have been a better follow-up question on the taxes issue if ABC had asked, Mr. Vice President, don't you plan to repeal all of the Trump tax cuts? Believe it, his answer is yes. And if that's the case, that you're not just raising taxes on people making $400,000 a year or more, you're raising taxes on all of the middle class, plus just to even pay for any little smidgen of the agenda that they say that they want to do, everyone in America will have to pay more taxes. So I think as Americans start to come out of the coronavirus with a little bit more understanding of how it's transmitted and how to protect themselves and how to get back to work, the pocketbook issues are going to come right up to the forefront, and you're going to think, Wow, I might not like that guy, but I really don't want that to happen to my finances.
All right, Greg, so this 40,000-foot view, that's basically saying that anything, if you look at it from a great enough distance, everything is essentially the same. It's totally undifferentiated. So if Joe's plan is no different than Biden's, then it's no different than President Trump's. So who cares at all? It's nihilism.
You could actually say that Joe in another era could have been a Republican, like maybe 5 years ago. But according to the media, in my view, Joe isn't a tool of the far left. He is a tool of the far right, by their definition, because he just got the endorsement of white supremacist Richard Spencer. And Joe Biden has not personally rejected it. And by the low information pundit standard, or lip standard, that I created, he is now a white supremacist purely by association. And maybe Richard Spencer is one of Joe's very fine people, much like Robert Byrd, who was once a Klansman who Joe had eulogized, or the segregationists that he had defended. These are all racists, right? But I kid the bigot.
I think that Democrats are going to have a hard time selling tax and spend redistribution in an economy like this. And the fact that Joe Biden, Juan, is talking about raising taxes and not creating more prosperity, is that really a message that Americans want to hear right now?
I think he is talking about creating prosperity. He's intent on fulfilling the promise made by one Donald Trump about getting infrastructure going in this country. But let me just speak to this point about socialism, because this is not going to stick to Joe Biden. The American people know Joe Biden, and Joe Biden is no socialist. In fact, Joe Biden's struggle is with the far left of the Democratic Party, those young far left voters who really have not embraced him as their own. This is the Biden who led an economic recovery for President Obama that was criticized as corporate socialism, Kennedy. That's not a socialist. That's not a socialist. That's someone boosting the American economy and subjecting himself to criticism of too big to fail in order to get the job done. This is the Joe Biden of the crime bill. Is that a socialist? This is the Joe Biden, who
That's
is
an
using.
authoritarian.
No, I think that what you got here is that the Trump campaign is using the playbook they had laid out to run against Bernie Sanders. But guess what? This is not Bernie Sanders, folks. This is Joe Biden, and they are struggling big time.
I understand, but Bernie Sanders did get an awful lot jammed into that DNC platform. Jesse, take it away.
Well, the Republicans didn't say Joe and Biden, Joe and Bernie are the same. Barack Obama said it, Juan. So I'd be careful.
From 40,000 feet,
Okay,
Jesse, and it's very popular to say, let's fix healthcare, let's cut down the cost.
I know
let's
why
deal with income inequality.
Okay.
I know why he said it, Juan. Because if he really wanted to say that, he would have said it during the DNC in front of all those Americans watching. Instead, he said it to a periodical. And so who's he really talking to? He's talking to the far left base. He knows that there's a fracture in the base, and they're not enthusiastic for Joe Biden. So he's doing a little base maintenance. He knows this is about turnout. He's seen the numbers. He knows they're not excited about Joe. So he's just trying to soothe the concerns of the far left. Everybody sees it. We just got the numbers out of the DNC. 1,000 DNC delegates voted against the Joe Biden Democratic platform. That's 25% of the delegates said, no, Joe, we're not happy with it. So the proof's in the pudding. And to raise taxes during a recession is moronic. And he's talking about income, carbon taxes, estate taxes, capital gains taxes, and corporate taxes. He's proposing $4 trillion in new taxes. Hillary only proposed $1 trillion. So I don't know what he's doing.
Nobody under 400,000?
Yeah, fat
Why?
chance.
He said he's repealing it all.
Yeah,
Taxes,
the middle class will have their
corporate,
taxes
everything.
raised in order to fund this impossible agenda. And we should point out, by the way, the Biden campaign did, in fact, disavow that endorsement by white supremacist
But
Richard
Joe
Spencer.
didn't, Kennedy. Joe didn't.
Gosh, here we go.
No, you got to personally disavow it or you're racist. That's the standard set by the media. So don't pretend that somehow we're changing the standard, that the campaign, the campaign disavowed it. No, Joe has to personally disavow it the way Trump has to disavow how every single time some idiot decides to endorse him, we got it. I didn't invent the rules. The LIP did. Let's follow the rules.
All right, we'll pay some more lip service coming up next. First Lady Melania Trump facing nasty attacks after renovating the White House Rose Garden. That's coming up.
So, did you hear the First Lady upgraded the Rose Garden? I only did because the media trashed it. One hack pointed out that Melania was a foreigner with no right to wreck our history. Another idiot said her garden appeared racist. That's true. And there was this has-been named Howard Feynman who entered the fray with this "Yes, I'm still alive" tweet. The Trump family did its best to turn the lovely Rose Garden into a neo-fascist parade ground. So, you add a path in the Rose Garden to make it accessible for people with disability, and that makes you Hitler. Feynman on Twitter is like a 7-year-old trying to pull a wheelie on a mobile scooter to impress the kids. Speaking of Hitler, and aren't we always speaking of Hitler? It's like the media has Hitler Tourette's, always blurting out his name at clouds and squirrels. Left-wing loon Jamil Hill, tweets, "If you were of the opinion that the United States wasn't nearly as bad as Nazi Germany, how wrong you are. How wonderful for Jews or anyone to be considered as evil as those who gassed their loved ones." Bottom line, I'm really starting to like Twitter again. For it reveals what we always suspected, that the media's secret thoughts are equal parts shallow and hateful, a kiddie pool of bile. Twitter now lets them nakedly parade their neo-fascism. So keep tweeting, guys. You make my job on Mondays super easy. So, Jesse, what do you make? I always sense when something like this happens on Twitter, it's a bunch of hacks trying to impress each other with insults.
I would tell the hacks, be best hacks. And as the horticulturalist of the show, I would say, Greg, the crabapple trees needed to go.
Yes.
Also, you're getting a lot of fake news with the photos. They're showing you a full bloom April rose garden versus a late summer new planting rose garden. There's going to be some color contrasts there.
Fake blooms.
Fake blooms. Also, can Michelle Obama, I think, the only time I can remember people attacking Michelle Obama was for the school lunch program. And that was because kids were starving on Meatless Mondays. Think about the attacks on Melania. I mean, it's her son, her marriage, her clothing, her Christmas decorations, her accent, her renovations. It never ends. And at this point, I just have to say, attacking our history, that doesn't have anything to do with toppling statues or kneeling for the anthem or saying that, you know, all of the Mount Everest, I mean, all of the Mount Rushmore people, that's racist. Moving a rose around is an attack on the history. And to quote the great Gertrude Stein Gutfeld,
yes,
a rose is a rose is a rose.
Well, you truly rose to this occasion, Jesse. So, Juan, is handicap access a sign of neo-fascism? And what is the difference between neo-fascism and actual fascism? I don't know.
Well, I'm sure you would know, Greg. I just, you know what?
Wow.
You know what I think from the pictures I've seen, and remember, I've seen the Rose Garden, you know, since the 80s. I don't think that this is fair criticism at all. I think that she made some changes. If it makes her happy, if she thinks she's renovating the place, have at it. Clearly, she put in more electronic opportunity, you know, like better staging for television. And later this week, she's going to use the Rose Garden as a stage for a speech that she's going to give at the convention. But with regard to the changes, I just think maybe a little too much emphasis here. You know, I just don't see it.
You know, Dana, I am a hypocrite because I love stories like these because they're so easy to talk about. And they're like essentially just created by Twitter. Idiots
like
on Twitter.
popcorn.
Yeah.
It's like popcorn. You just keep eating it.
Yeah.
Keep eating it. I have to say that anybody who is like a weekend Twitter warrior anymore, like, you've got to get a life, man. Just like, come on. Get off of. Nothing good happens on Saturday when you're tweeting. You should be with your family and enjoying things.
Tell me about it.
I also think that gardens take a while to mature. I think that what she did here will probably be praised in just a little while, when especially any new administration coming forward will be glad that she went to the trouble of upgrading all of those electronics, because it's a beautiful, wonderful place, a historic place for presidents to have events, to make important announcements, and I think they'll be glad for it in the end.
Kennedy, do you garden?
I do.
You do. I bet you're a really good gardener.
I kill everything. It's very sad. I'm an enthusiast, but I'm really bad at it. But I will say, having grown up in Oregon, in the Rose City, roses are beautiful. They're very difficult to maintain, and they're going to be gorgeous. And everyone needs to just relax. This is not the end of the world. It's not the end of our history. We don't need to invoke xenophobia rather, in order to make ourselves feel better. And the crab apples are just fine. They have been moved to a safe location. They are in a greenhouse. They have been preserved. They will be replanted. Jackie Kennedy's legacy has not been soiled. Everyone needs to take a breath and shut your pie holes. Put a rose in there.
There you go. All right, soiled. I love that word. Next, Biden vows to keep his basement campaign going and hits back at questions over his age.
Don't expect to see much of sleepy Joe Biden on the campaign trail between now and November. Take a look.
Can you win a presidential election from home?
We will. We're going to follow the science, what the scientists tell us. We've been able to travel places when we've been able to do it in a way that we don't cause the congregation of large numbers of people.
Biden also not ruling out running for a second term, and he's hitting back at Trump over attacks about his mental fitness.
Watch me, Mr. President, watch me. Look at us both, what we say, what we do, what we control, what we know, what kind of shape we're in. Come on.
Watch me, Dana. Well, we've been watching, and we're a little nervous.
Well, I think that's, again, why the debates are going to be so important, right? Because there's no handlers, there's no tape, it's live, it happens right there, and people can assess for themselves. I do think it's a little bit unsustainable to think that you're not going to leave Delaware at all during these next 2 months. That doesn't seem possible to me. I also think that there's just a little bit of common sense that comes forward here, which is, it comes to my mind, masks are important, social distancing important, and also hand washing. But if you are with your people and you're in your own little bubble and it's been 2 weeks and nobody's sick and nobody's leaving the bubble, then you can have more interaction. Like when they were all on stage on Thursday night at the DNC, I did think that they could have taken off their masks and smiled and everything would have been perfectly safe. Americans have started to understand that and learn that, and I think they're trying to lead too much by example right now.
Juan, do you agree with that?
No, I think example, especially if you are running for president, you're the leader, and it's a great example for the American people that we should protect each other and care about whether someone gets sick. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And in response to your question, Jesse, about that strategy, I would just simply say, have you seen the speech that he gave last Thursday? Have you seen the polls? Did you see the convention? If you got a winning strategy, why change it? What it looks like to me is that Republicans are trying to bait Joe Biden into changing a winning strategy, and Joe's no fool. He's not biting.
Well, I don't think that's why he's ahead in the polls, Juan. And 2 polls have come out, Greg, since the convention. Biden did not get a bump. I'm talking about Joe, not Hunter. Joe Biden did not get a bump.
Nicely done. That's a very Gutfeldian line. Almost up there, I have to say. But you know what the best part of the interview was? When Joe says that he is okay with serving 2 terms, because that wasn't in the deal with Kamala, you know? I actually found a picture of Ms. Harris when she first heard Joe say that. Look at him. Yeah. There you go. There you go. That's actually a nuclear test in Nevada.
Yes.
Just so people don't get upset.
Yes, and
write to
Biden
me.
is against those nuclear tests.
Yes.
He doesn't want to update the military. All right, Kennedy, take us home.
Yes, Joe Biden, watch me. The only thing that's going to solve this whole thing between these two, no more words, shirtless wrestling. Let's see it, gentlemen.
Wow.
I want to see it. I'm for that.
I need a. Wow,
People make me sick.
I need a new one more thing now. One more thing's next.
It's time now for one more thing. Jesse, did you have enough time to get a new one?
We swapped out the shirtless wrestling for some bear news. Look at me with all those bears. So you know in the tabloids, Dana, how they have celebrities. They're just like us.
Yes.
Well, they also are a lot like humans, too. Watch this.
This actual bear right there that I almost walked into has decided that he's going to go shopping.
So this grizzly
Wow.
goes into a grocery store and just pops open a bag of potato chips, starts eating the chips before he even checks out. What celebrity hasn't done that? World-class celebrity Greg Gutfeld, I know, has popped open some chips. As
I would
he's
have
checking it out.
taken a White Claw.
Very good, very
good.
Love bear news. All right, I want to talk about all-star singer-songwriter Darius Rucker. You might know him. He's out with a new single just in time for the summer. It was called Beer and Sunshine, but who doesn't like those two things? So that's a great song, but here's the thing. He raised over $250,000 for charity through Darius and Friends. That's a benefit show for St. Jude, $255,000. So that's normally done during the week of Country Music Awards. Everything got screwed up because of COVID, but they still came through. So congratulations to everybody who worked on that, and thank you, Darius Rucker, for all your great work. Also, I hosted a special Fox News Rundown podcast with Trey Gowdy. We talked about his new book, which is called It Doesn't Hurt to Ask. We talked a lot about recent criticisms of law enforcement and why he has so much respect for police officers. And you can listen to that at foxnewspodcast.com. Okay, Greg.
All right, I have an article up at foxnews.com in the opinion section called Share the Risk, How to End Cancel Culture. I think you should read it. Also, it's time for something new. Greg's, what did he step in? All right, I want to take a look at this. Let's roll this video here. You'll see this dog enjoying himself with a great view, and then, whoops. Oh, something happened in there. All I'm assuming is that he must have stepped in something that shocked and surprised him, perhaps disturbed and dismayed. There he goes again. I'm wondering if he stepped on a Lego. Do you think somebody was playing with Legos out there? Could it have been a Lego?
Possibly.
Yes.
And they didn't put him away. But yeah, they should have put him away. Like your mom always said.
I say that about every criminal.
Lego my ego. All right, Juan, you're next.
All right, so I want to tell you guys about a hero tonight, someone who gave his life to save others. On Friday night, Sivad Johnson, a veteran firefighter in Detroit, was with his 10-year-old daughter in Belle Isle Park on the Detroit River. He heard people screaming for help. 3 young girls were struggling to stay afloat, swimmers in the river. So Mr. Johnson handed his keys and cell phones to his daughter and jumped in the river to save the girls. And after the girls reached shore safely, his little daughter, 10 years old, realized her dad had not returned. The riptides had pulled him under. Rescue workers found his body the next day. So I think all of us here at The Five want to say hats off to someone who sacrificed himself for others in a moment of urgent need, Detroit Fire Sergeant Sivad Johnson. Rest in peace.
Indeed, what an incredible person. Kennedy.
God bless him. May his memory be eternal. And now let's move to something a little bit more optimistic. There has been so much sadness, and they are celebrating in the Cincinnati Zoo because you may have heard about a panda blah, blah, blah being born in Washington. But look at this. This is the eastern black rhino, a critically endangered rhino. Takes 16 months to gestate, and when they are born, they weigh up to 100. That's a hippo. They weigh up to 140 pounds. But these black rhinos, there are very few of them left on Earth. This is incredible news. And that rhino's name?
Romney.
Jeff Flake.
Romney. Oh, everybody had the same joke.
Yeah. Love it when that happens. fans love it when that happens. Jesse, I have to compliment you on your musical choices tonight. That they're very good. Kennedy, yours are always great. Greg, I don't remember yours.
Iggy Pop.
Probably weren't as good.
I want to be your dog.
I don't even. Dog. Okay. That's it for us. Special coverage of the Republican National Convention begins right now on Special Report. Hey, Brett.
Hey, Dana. I hope I make Jesse's Bear News sometime. Good evening. Welcome to Washington.